I want to share with you today an idea I learned from Rabbi Mimi Feigelson, who teaches at the Schechter Institute, our Masorti school in Jerusalem. They put out a weekly Torah message in English. I don't always have time to read it, but if Rabbi Feigelson writes it, I make time to read it because I know it will be worth reading. She has an extensive knowledge of Hasidic Torah teachings, and she is an impressive teacher. So we begin today the reading of Moses' farewell speech to the Israelites, and they stand at the border of the land of Israel, and he speaks of the history he has shared with them. He reminds them why he appointed leaders within the tribes 40 years earlier. He said, Echa esa levadi, how can I bear the burden alone? It's a rhetorical question, of course. He's telling them, I cannot do this without some help. And he reminds the people, listen very carefully to this part. He had said, bring forth men who are wise, understanding, and well-known. And he says this is what the people did. They brought forth men who were wise and well-known. And I've read this dozens of times, and I never noticed what was happening. Moses asked them to bring forth people who were wise, understanding, and well-known, but what he got from the people were people who were wise and well-known. But these wise and well-known leaders were not necessarily understanding. What was it that they didn't understand? One of the Hasidic masters who lived in the middle of the 19th century was Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Leiner, known as the Ishbitzer Rebbe. I know that what he teaches here is not the Peshat, it's not the straightforward meaning of the text, but it's an amazing interpretation nevertheless. The Ishbitzer Rebbe quotes a passage from the Talmud which says, it takes 40 years for a student to understand the depth of his teacher. The spies brought back this terrible report about how difficult it would be to conquer the land, not because they lacked faith, says the Ishbitzer Rebbe. They were worried that Moses would not go into the land with them. They believed, we need Moses. We have so much to learn from him. They tried to outsmart God. They brought back this terrible report of the land so that they could keep Moses with them. Now, what a brilliant plan, right? You want to keep Moses with you, you fix things so you all get to stay in the desert for another 40 years. Whoever comes up with this kind of plan is someone of whom your bubby would say, a chocham, a wise person, but with no common sense. The person who wants to be in the desert for 40 years more just so he can learn from Moses may be wise, may be renowned, may be well-intentioned, but he doesn't understand bupkis. And now, as the people are at the edge of the promised land, all these years later, Moses says, I cannot do this alone. What is it that he wants to do? Moses wants to persuade God, but he can't do it alone. He doesn't say it directly. But Moses is trying to tell the people, I cannot persuade God by myself. He wants them to hear him, to show some understanding, and to respond by saying, yes, Moses, we're going to pray for you. We're going to tell God that we need you. We're going to tell God that he should let you come with us. But they don't understand. They don't understand what Moses wants. They don't understand what he needs from them. Even after 40 years, when he says, I cannot do this alone. They don't hear what he is really requesting of them. The Israelites had their teacher for those 40 years. They should have known his heart. They should have known what he was telling them, but they do not hear. It is more tragic than Moses' death, more tragic than his inability to go into the promised land with the Israelites. The Ishbitzer Rebbe says that the real tragedy is that even at the end of his life, even though his people have followed him all these years, Moses is not understood. I am sure there are those who are with us either here in the sanctuary or participating from home who wonder if there is anyone who really understands what they are feeling in this time of the coronavirus. I know there are people who live alone, who have seen very few people face to face for over 4 months, who are saying, I cannot do this alone. Do we understand them? Do we reach out to them? Some people are trying to maintain a business that just doesn't work when all their customers are staying home. They may not be literally alone, but they may feel alone. They may wonder who understands how perilous it is when your livelihood is at stake. And they also may want to cry out, to have someone appreciate their fear that life is collapsing. And then there are the bereaved, so many bereaved. Many have recovered, most recover, but too many do not. And they leave behind someone who feels so alone, who don't even have the comfort of a hug during Shiva. And on weekdays in the middle part of the Amidah, we pray for all kinds of things. The first blessing in that section asks God for Dea, Bina, Vahaskel, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. What's the difference between these three things? Rabbi Elliot Dorff suggests they represent three different kinds of knowing. Dea, knowledge, is facts, right? Some of you remember Joe Friday from the show Dragnet. What was his tagline? Just the facts. Facts may be simple, but they are important. Haskel, wisdom, means experiential knowledge, things you learn by seeing someone else do it. And then you get your hands on it and you figure it out. When I was an intern in rabbinical school, I had some facts, but there were certain things I didn't know how to do until I followed my mentor around for a little while. Bina, understanding, discernment, is different. It's how you know when to apply one rule and when to apply a different rule, or what to do if you're in one of those situations when none of the rules you've been taught applies. It's how you figure out what to do during a situation like the pandemic, something you've never seen before. And only with understanding and with empathy for what others around us are feeling can leaders make good decisions. The Kabbalists point out that Bina, understanding, derives from the word boneh, which means building. Whatever understanding we attain has to build up others, build up and support other institutions. When so many people are facing uncertainty and saying, I cannot do this alone, that's where our understanding has to kick in and ask, who do I know that may be thinking this? And what can I do for them. As Rabbi Strauss mentioned, this Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, the day of mourning the Jewish people, this Shabbat is called Shabbat Chazon. The word Chazon means vision. Is the chapter that Bob read begins with the words Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Isaiah. But sometimes, out of suffering, comes a vision of what we need to do. Maybe the Israelites in the time of Moses could not figure it out. Perhaps we will do better. Shabbat Shalom.